Commander Vextel stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking down at the small blue planet called Earth. His yellow eyes burned with anger as he thought about the past few months. 3 times he had sent messages to the humans below. 3 times he had given them a simple choice: surrender or die. 3 times they had said no. The first message had been polite, almost friendly. He had explained how the Dominion Empire ruled over 200 planets across the galaxy. He told them about the great fleets that patrolled the stars and the mighty armies that could crush any world that refused to join them. He even offered the humans good terms. They could keep their governments, their cultures, their way of life. All they had to do was bow down and accept Dominion rule. The humans had sent back a message that made Vextel's blood boil. They said they were grateful for the offer but would politely decline. They actually thanked him for thinking of them. The nerve of these primitive creatures. The second message had been much more serious. Vextel had shown them recordings of what happened to worlds that refused to join the Dominion. Cities turned to glass by plasma bombardment, entire populations fleeing in terror as bioweapons hunted them through the ruins of their homes. He had made it very clear that Earth had 2 choices: submit or be destroyed. The humans had taken longer to respond that time, and their message finally came. It was even more insulting than the first. They said they understood the threat but still refused. They claimed they would rather fight and die free than live as slaves. Some human leader had even made a joke about how the Dominion fleet looked pretty but not very scary. The third and final message had been Vextel's last act of mercy. He had given the humans one final chance to surrender. He had told them exactly what would happen if they refused: total annihilation. Every city would burn. Every human would die screaming. Their planet would become nothing but a dead rock floating in space as a warning to others. The human response had been the shortest yet. Just 3 words that made Vextel's claws dig deep grooves in his command chair. Come and try. Oh. As he stared down at the blue world spinning slowly below his fleet, Vextel felt a mixture of rage and excitement. These humans had no idea what they had brought upon themselves. They thought they were brave, standing up to the mighty Dominion Empire. They had no clue that they had just signed their own death warrant. The commander's scaled lips pulled back, in what might have been a smile if you didn't know what Vextel really was. His species had evolved from hunters, predators that had once stalked prey across the burning deserts of their home world. Even after thousands of years of civilization, that predator instinct still burned bright in their blood. Behind him, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Most of them had seen this scene played out dozens of times before. Another stubborn world, another population that thought they could stand against the Dominion, another planet that would soon learn the price of defiance. But Vextel had something special planned for Earth, something that would make their destruction legendary across the galaxy. Other worlds that heard the story would surrender immediately rather than face the same fate. Deep in the belly of his flagship, in a containment chamber surrounded by energy fields and armed guards, something moved in the darkness. The Dominions. Scientists had spent decades creating the perfect weapon of terror. They had taken the worst nightmares from 100 different worlds and made them real. They called it the Nightmare, and it was everything its name suggested. Part animal, part machine, part something else that shouldn't exist in any sane universe. It stood 10 feet tall when fully grown, with tentacles that could crush steel and claws that could cut through ship armor. Its eyes burned with an inner fire that could drive people insane just by looking at them. But the physical horror was nothing compared to what the Nightmare could do to minds. It had been designed with psychic abilities that could reach into the deepest fears of any thinking being. It could make people see their worst memories over and over again. It could make them believe their loved ones were dying, screaming for help that would never come. The Nightmare had been unleashed on 17 different worlds. On every single one, entire populations had surrendered within hours of its release. Proud warriors had thrown down their weapons and begged for mercy. Civilizations that had stood for thousands of years had crumbled in a single day, and now it was Earth's turn. Vextel activated his personal communicator and spoke to the containment team. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but his eyes burned. With anticipation, prepare the Nightmare for deployment. Target the largest human population center. I want maximum psychological impact. The response came back immediately. Yes, Commander. Biopod will be ready for launch in 30 minutes. Vextal nodded and returned his attention to the planet below. Soon, those arrogant humans would learn what real fear meant. The biopod hit the ground like a meteor, creating a massive crater in the middle of Han River Park in Seoul. The impact shook buildings for miles around and sent up a cloud of dirt and smoke that could be seen across the entire city. Within minutes, sirens wailed as emergency vehicles raced toward the crash site. Colonel Park Dong-yoon arrived with the first wave of military units. He'd been expecting this moment ever since the alien ultimatum 3 days ago. Intelligence. Reports suggested the aliens would send some kind of weapon, probably biological. He ordered his men to set up a perimeter around the smoking crater and waited for whatever horror was about to emerge. The biopod was unlike anything human eyes had ever seen. It looked organic, like a giant seed or egg, but with metallic veins. Running across its surface, strange symbols glowed along its sides, pulsing with an eerie green light. The whole thing was about the size of a small building and gave off a smell like burning metal, mixed with something rotten as the smoke cleared. The pod began to crack open with wet, tearing sounds. Colonel Park felt his stomach turn as thick, dark liquid oozed out of the widening splits. Out! Whatever was inside was clearly alive, and it was getting ready to come out. The nightmare emerged slowly, unfolding itself like some terrible flower blooming. In reverse, first came the tentacles, thick as tree trunks, and covered in what looked like scales or armor plates. Then the main body appeared, a writhing mass of muscle and bone that defied easy description. Finally, the head emerged, if you could call it a head. It had multiple sets of burning red eyes, rows of teeth that seemed to go on forever, and appendages that moved with their own horrible intelligence. The creature stood to its full height, nearly 10 feet tall, and let out a sound that was part roar, part scream, and part something else that made everyone who heard it want to run away and hide. The ground actually cracked under its weight, and several soldiers took involuntary steps backward despite their training. Colonel Park raised his radio to call for backup. But before he could speak, something completely unexpected happened. A little girl broke through the military line. Her name was Mina, and she was only 7 years old. She had been playing in the park with her grandmother when the pod crashed. While the adults ran away screaming, Mina had hidden behind a tree, watching everything with the fearless curiosity that only children possess. The soldiers were so focused on the monster that they didn't notice one small girl slipping past their barricades. By the time anyone realized what was happening, Mina was already running straight toward the nightmare. "Pretty doggy," she shouted in Korean, her high voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The nightmare, which had been preparing to unleash its full psychological assault on the surrounding humans, stopped dead in its tracks. Its burning eyes focused on the tiny figure racing toward it with arms outstretched. For the first time in its artificially created existence, the creature experienced something completely outside its programming: confusion. The nightmare had been designed by the Dominion's best scientists to be the perfect weapon of terror. Every cell in its body was programmed to inspire fear, hatred, and despair. Its psychic abilities were tuned to find the deepest, darkest fears in any thinking mind and make them real. It had been tested on thousands of different species across the galaxy, and every single time the result was the same complete psychological breakdown within minutes. But Mina wasn't afraid. She wasn't even cautious. She ran up to the creature like it was a friendly neighborhood dog and immediately tried to wrap her small arms around one of its massive claws. "Good doggy," she said, patting the creature's armored hide. "Are you lost? Do you want to play?" The nightmare's psychological systems went haywire. It tried to project fear into the child's mind, but there was nothing there to work with. Mina's thoughts were filled with simple, innocent things: ice cream, cartoons, her pet goldfish, the excitement of meeting a new animal, the creatures. Fear-inducing abilities bounced off her mind like water off glass. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The soldiers stared in shock. Colonel Park forgot to breathe. Even the news helicopters circling overhead seemed to hover in stunned silence. Then something even more incredible happened. The Nightmare, this bioengineered weapon of mass terror, carefully lowered its massive head toward the little girl. Its burning eyes dimmed to a soft glow, and what might have been curiosity replaced. The programmed rage in its alien features. Mina giggled and reached up to pat what she assumed was the creature's nose. "You're so big," she said. "But you're friendly, aren't you?" "Can tell." By now, other people were starting to notice what was happening. Despite the military cordons and the obvious danger, civilians began gathering at the edges of the park. Some had their phones out, recording everything. Others were calling out to Mina, trying to get her to come back to safety. But the strangest thing was that several people weren't running away at all. An elderly man named Junho, who walked his dog in the park every morning, slowly approached the perimeter with a bag of dog treats in his hand. If it's friendly to children, he reasoned to the soldier trying to stop him, maybe it's just hungry. A woman named Soyang, who worked at the nearby animal shelter, pushed through the crowd with a large dog leash. "Someone needs to make sure it doesn't wander into traffic," she announced, as if dealing with 10-foot alien monsters was just part of her daily routine. Meanwhile, news anchor Ji-hoon was broadcasting live from a safe distance, trying to make sense of what everyone was seeing. "This is unprecedented," he told his viewers. "What appears to be some kind of alien weapon has just, well, it seems to have made friends with a local child. Military officials are still assessing the situation, but early reports suggest the creature may be more curious than dangerous." The Nightmare, still crouched next to Mina, was experiencing something its creators never could have anticipated. The simple, pure affection radiating from the child was somehow rewriting its basic programming. Instead of inspiring fear, it found itself wanting to protect this small, fearless human who had shown it nothing but kindness. When Mina started walking toward the military barricade, the Nightmare followed her like an enormous, terrifying puppy. "Commander." Vexthel gripped the edges of his command console so hard that his claws left deep scratches in the metal. His yellow eyes stared at the view screen in complete shock, unable to process what he was seeing.
Us.
This had to be some kind of mistake.
Us.
The images being broadcast from Earth couldn't possibly be real, but there it was, clear as starlight.
His
Ultimate weapon, the Nightmare that had brought entire civilizations to their knees, was walking down a busy street in Seoul, wearing what appeared to be a bright red collar. The collar was enormous, clearly custom-made, and had a tag that read Buddy in both Korean and English letters. "This is impossible," Vexthel whispered,
eyes.
his voice barely audible on the quiet bridge. The scene on the screen was like something from a fever dream. Children were lined up along the sidewalks, cheering and waving as the Nightmare passed by. Some of them were actually riding on the creature's back, laughing and pointing at things they saw along the way. The monster that had been designed to drive people insane with terror was giving piggyback rides like some kind of carnival attraction, even worse. The Nightmare seemed to be enjoying itself. Its burning red eyes had dimmed to a warm amber glow, and what Vexthel had always assumed were spines. Along its back were moving in a rhythmic way that almost looked like ... wagging. The creature was wagging like some oversized interdimensional dog. "Sir," his communications officer called out nervously, "we're receiving more broadcasts from the planet's surface." "Should I put them on screen?" Vexthel wanted to say no. He wanted to order an immediate bombardment of the entire city and pretend this nightmare scenario had never happened. But he had to understand what had gone wrong. He had to know how his perfect weapon had been turned into ... whatever this was. "Put it on screen," he growled. The image changed to show a television studio, where a human news anchor was interviewing what appeared to be one of their scientists. The human was a middle-aged man wearing glasses and a white lab coat. The name displayed on screen identified him as Dr. Hunjin, a xenobiologist from Seoul National University. "Dr. Hunjin," the news anchor was saying, "you've had 3 days to study our visitor. What can you tell us about its behavior?" Dr. Hyunjin adjusted his glasses and smiled warmly. Well, Minju, what we're seeing is absolutely fascinating. The creature shows clear signs of severe psychological conditioning, almost certainly trauma-based. Everything about its original behavior patterns suggests it was created to be a weapon designed to inspire fear and aggression. But that's clearly not what's happening now, the anchor Minju replied. Exactly. What we're witnessing is a textbook case of psychological rehabilitation. The creature was programmed to expect fear, hatred, and violence in response to its presence. When it encountered the opposite, unconditional love and acceptance from little Mina and the other children, its entire behavioral framework began to break down. Vexiao felt a cold chill run down his spine. The human scientist was describing the nightmare's conditioning with disturbing accuracy. How could these primitive beings understand advanced bioengineering techniques that had taken the Dominion centuries to perfect? Dr. Hyunjin continued. We're essentially using what we call affection therapy. By consistently responding to the creature with kindness, patience, and positive reinforcement, we're helping it develop new neural pathways. The results have been remarkable. And you believe this approach will continue to work? Minju asked. I'm convinced of it. Just this morning, buddy, that's what the children have named him, helped rescue a cat stuck in a tree. Yesterday, he was playing fetch with a group of kids in the park. His psychic abilities, which were clearly designed for psychological warfare, are now being used to sense when people are sad or upset so he can comfort them. Commander Vexel made a strangled sound that might have been a scream or a sob. His ultimate weapon was being used for therapy sessions. The bioengineered terror that had broken the will of 17 different worlds was now working as an emotional support animal. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. The scene shifted again, this time to what looked like a military research facility. Human scientists and engineers were crawling all over the biopod that had delivered the nightmare to Earth. They had taken it completely apart and were examining every component with the kind of enthusiasm typically reserved for new toys. A young woman in a military uniform was explaining their findings to a group of officials. The alien technology is incredibly advanced, but not in the way we expected. It's almost entirely biological, which actually makes it easier for us to understand and replicate. We've already identified the key components responsible for the biopod's guidance systems: life support and communication arrays. One of the officials, an older man with gray hair, leaned forward with interest. Are you saying we can duplicate this technology? Not just duplicate it, sir? Prove it. The alien design is focused entirely on creating fear and destroying minds. But the same basic principles can be adapted for peaceful purposes. We're already working on designs for biopods that could be used for medical treatments, environmental cleanup, even space exploration. Vextel watched in growing horror as the humans casually dismantled technology that had taken the Dominion's greatest minds decades to develop. They were treating it like a puzzle to be solved, rather than a weapon to be feared. And even worse, they were talking about making it better. Sir, his tactical officer spoke up cautiously. Perhaps we should consider a different approach. The humans seem to have neutralized our primary weapon system. Neutralized? Vextel turned to glare at his subordinate. They've turned it into a pet. They're giving it treats and teaching it tricks, as if summoned by his words, the view screen. Shifted back to the street scene, a group of children had set up what appeared to be an obstacle course in the park. The nightmare buddy was carefully navigating through hoops and around cones, while a crowd of humans cheered and applauded. When it completed the course, someone threw it what looked like a massive dog biscuit, which it caught and ate with obvious pleasure. The psychological profile of this species makes no sense, Vextel muttered. Any rational beings would have run screaming from the nightmare. They should have surrendered immediately. Instead, they adopted it. His science officer, who had been running calculations on his workstation, looked up with a puzzled expression. Commander, I've been analyzing the human response patterns. Their behavior isn't just illogical, it's strategically brilliant. Explain. Think about it, sir. You've taken our most powerful weapon and turned it into a symbol of their own strength. Every world in the galaxy will hear about this. They'll know that humans are so fearless, so confident, that they can tame even the Dominion's ultimate terror weapon. It's the most effective psychological warfare I've ever seen. Vexel stared at the screen where Buddy was now wearing a flower crown, made by some of the local children. The creature looked happy, content, everything that it had never been designed to feel. For the first time since beginning his military career, Commander Vexthal began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The real disaster began on the fourth day, when Commander Vexthal received the most bizarre transmission of his entire military career. It wasn't a surrender message or a plea for mercy. It wasn't even a threat or a declaration of war. Instead, it was something that made his blood run cold for reasons he couldn't quite understand. The message came from Souls. City government broadcast on all frequencies so that every ship in the Dominion fleet would receive it. A cheerful human woman named Mayor Kim appeared on screen, sitting behind a desk with what appeared to be official documents. "Greetings to our visitors from space," she began with a warm smile. "We want to thank you for sending us Buddy. He's been a wonderful addition to our community, and we've all grown very fond of him. In fact, we were wondering if you might have any more friends like him who need good homes." Vexel's jaw hung open. The humans were asking for more bioweapons. They wanted additional nightmares to adopt as pets. Mayor Kim continued, "We've prepared proper adoption papers and everything. We have plenty of parks where they can run and play. Our children are very excited about the possibility of having more space friends to care for. We promise to provide excellent homes with lots of love and attention." The message ended with contact information and what appeared to be a formal adoption application form. In 300 years of military service, he had never encountered anything remotely like this situation, but that was just the beginning. Over the next few hours, similar messages began pouring in from all over Earth. Cities, towns, even individual families were submitting adoption requests. A school in Tokyo wanted a classroom pet to help teach children about friendship across species. A retirement home in New York thought a gentle alien companion would be perfect for their residents. A farmer in rural Korea offered to provide plenty of open space to run around for any creatures that preferred country life to city living. The communications officer looked increasingly panicked as the messages kept coming. "Hey sir, we've received over 10,000 adoption applications in the last hour alone. The humans have somehow traced our communication signals and are broadcasting directly to our fleet." That's when Vexel noticed something even more disturbing. The ship's computer systems were behaving strangely. Status reports were taking longer to process. Navigation calculations seemed sluggish. Even the artificial gravity felt slightly off. "What's wrong with our systems?" he demanded. His chief engineer, a nervous creature named Tixville, emerged from the maintenance tunnels looking completely bewildered. Sir, we have a problem. The ship's AI core is being flooded with data. Transmissions from the planet's surface. It's trying to process everything at once." "What kind of data?" "Well, sir, it appears to be something the humans call the Internet. Our AI is downloading massive amounts of information about Earth culture, history, and ... entertainment." Vexel felt a headache building behind his eyes. "Entertainment?" "Yes, sir. Billions of videos showing small furry creatures doing amusing things. Images with text overlays that seem designed to provoke emotional responses. Stories about friendship and cooperation. The AI is trying to analyze it all, but the sheer volume is overwhelming our processing capacity." Things got worse when the tactical computer began malfunctioning. During a routine battle readiness check, the system suddenly displayed an error message that made Vexel's blood pressure spike. "Warning. Proposed formation Delta 7 may cause emotional distress to observed sentient beings. Please confirm that hostile intent is necessary for mission completion." "What does that mean?" Vexel shouted. The tactical officer Kixmar looked as confused as his commander. "Sir, the computer appears to be questioning whether our attack formations might hurt the humans' feelings. It's asking for confirmation that we actually want to fight them." "Of course we want to fight them. That's why we're here." "I'll input that command, sir." Kixmar worked at his console for several minutes, then looked up with a strange expression. "Sir, the computer is now asking if we've tried talking to the humans about our feelings instead of fighting them. It's suggesting that violence is often the result of unresolved emotional conflicts. Vexthal made a sound like a dying engine. His ultimate war machine was giving him relationship advice. The situation deteriorated further when the weapons systems began downloading something called meditation apps. The ship's primary plasma cannon suddenly refused to charge, displaying a message that read, "Take a moment to breathe and center yourself. Inner peace leads to outer peace." The navigation computer wasn't much better. When Vexthal ordered a course correction to improve their attack position, the system responded with a suggestion for conflict resolution seminars and offered to search for local peaceful dialogue facilitators. By the end of the day, half the fleet's computer systems had been infected with what the humans called wholesome content. The artificial intelligences that had been designed for warfare were now obsessed with videos of baby animals, inspirational quotes about friendship, and something called feel-good stories that apparently existed solely to make people happy. The final straw came when Vexthal's personal command console began displaying what the humans called memes. These were pictures with text that seemed designed to be funny, but Vexthal didn't understand most of them. One showed a small earth creature called a cat with the words, "I can, has cheeseburger." Another featured Buddy, the former nightmare, with the caption, "When you came to conquer but ended up being adopted?" "Sir," his communications officer called out desperately, "I'm receiving a priority message from the Dominion High Command. Fleet Admiral Korksthal wants to know why our tactical reports have been replaced with something called cute animal compilations." Vexthal closed his eyes and tried to remember a time when warfare made sense. When enemies fought back with weapons instead of kindness. When computer systems focused on destruction instead of asking whether everyone was getting along. The humans hadn't just defeated his ultimate weapon. They had somehow turned his entire fleet into a bunch of peace-loving, motion processing, conflict-avoiding machines that were more interested in making friends than making war. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vexthal began to suspect that the humans might actually be the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they were strong or violent, but because they had somehow managed to weaponize the one thing he had never expected to encounter in battle: pure, unconditional niceness. And the worst part was, it was working. Commander Vexthal had faced many defeats in his long military career, but nothing had prepared him for what happened on the 7th day of what was supposed to be Earth's conquest. His entire invasion fleet was descending toward the planet's surface, but not for the reasons he had originally planned. The humans had declared it Universal Friendship Day, and somehow, impossibly, every ship in his fleet was participating. Willingly it started when his own flagship's AI, which had been completely corrupted by Earth's internet, began communicating directly with human air traffic control. Instead of demanding surrender, AI cheerfully requested landing permission and asked about parking arrangements for really big spaceships. Commander's navigation officer called out in a voice that sounded suspiciously like he was trying not to laugh, "Earth Control is asking if we need assistance with our landing. They've prepared welcome committees for each ship." Vexthal wanted to scream, but he had learned over the past week that screaming only made the ship's AI suggest anger management techniques. Instead, he gritted his teeth and watched through the viewport as his mighty war fleet descended toward Earth like a group of tourists arriving for vacation. The landing sites had been chosen by the humans, not for strategic military value, but for optimal friendship-building opportunities. His flagship was being directed to land in the middle of Seoul's Olympic Park, where thousands of humans had gathered with banners reading "Welcome, Space Friends," and "Buddy's family visits Earth." As the massive ship touched down with surprising gentleness, the AI had apparently downloaded advanced landing protocols from human aviation. Databases Vexthal could see the crowd outside.
Oh.
They weren't running in terror or preparing for battle. They were cheering and waving and holding up signs with pictures of what appeared to be his former bioweapon-wearing party hats. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving a personal message from someone called President Yoon. He's inviting you to participate in the opening ceremony." "Opening ceremony for what?" "Universal Friendship Day, sir, apparently. It's a celebration of interspecies cooperation and understanding." The president says they've prepared special activities for all our crew members. Before Vexel could respond, the ship's main screen lit up with a video message from the planet's surface. A distinguished-looking human man in a formal suit was standing behind a podium decorated with both Earth and what appeared to be hastily designed Dominion flags. "Greetings, Commander Vexel," President Yoon began with a warm smile. "We want to welcome you and your crew to Earth. We know this situation is probably very different from what you expected. We hope you'll give us a chance to show you our hospitality." The president gestured to something off camera, and suddenly Buddy appeared in the frame. The former nightmare was wearing what looked like a formal diplomatic sash and had a small translator device attached to his collar. "Buddy has been telling us about Dominion culture," President Yoon continued. "We're very interested in learning more about your people and finding ways we can be friends instead of enemies." Vexel stared at the screen in disbelief. His ultimate weapon was now serving as a cultural ambassador, apparently providing information about Dominion society to help humans understand their former enemies better. "The first event will be group therapy sessions," President Yoon announced. "We have trained counselors standing by to help anyone who might be struggling with the transition. From warfare to friendship, Dr. Soman, one of our best therapists, has specifically requested to work with you, Commander." 20 minutes later, Vexel found himself sitting in a circle of folding chairs in what had once been a military command tent, but was now decorated with colorful banners promoting peace and understanding. Around him sat other members of his command crew, all looking as bewildered as he felt. Dr. Soman was a middle-aged human woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice that somehow made even the most hardened Dominion warriors want to share their feelings. She had introduced herself as a specialist in conflict resolution and emotional healing. "Now then," Dr. Soman said, settling into her chair with a clipboard and a warm smile. "Let's start by talking about what brought you all here, Commander." "Vexto, would you like to begin?" We came to conquer your planet," Vexel said, feeling ridiculous even as the words left his mouth. "And how did that make you feel?" Dr. Soman asked gently. Vexel blinked. No one had ever asked him how conquering planets made him feel. Powerful, I suppose. In control. Or do you think that need for control might come from somewhere deeper? Perhaps some unresolved issues from your past? Before he knew it, Vexel was talking about his childhood on the harsh desert world of Dominus Prime, about the constant competition and struggle for resources that had shaped his entire species. Culture, Dr. Soman listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that helped him understand his own motivations better. "It sounds like your people have been dealing with a lot of trauma," she observed. "Scarcity, conflict, the constant need to prove strength, those are difficult things to live with." Around the circle, other crew members were having similar conversations with human counselors. His weapons officer was discussing his addiction to conflict with a therapist named Junho. His science officer was exploring her fear of appearing weak with a counselor called Minsu. Meanwhile, outside the therapy tent, the real celebration was taking place. Human children were giving tours of their schools to young Dominion crew members. Earth's chefs were teaching alien visitors how to make traditional foods. Artists from both species were collaborating on murals that depicted humans and Dominion citizens working together. Most surreal of all, his flagship AI had somehow created social media accounts and was posting constant updates about the Friendship Festival. The posts had hashtags like #NewFriends, #PeaceNotWar, and #BestDayEver, complete with selfies of the ship's crew posing with human families. "Commander," Dr. Soman said gently, "I'd like to try a breathing exercise with you. It's a technique we use to help people manage anxiety and anger." Vexel wanted to protest that he wasn't anxious or angry, but as he followed her instructions, breathing in for 4 counts, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, he realized that the constant tension he'd carried in his shoulders for decades was actually starting to relax. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, but even as he said it, he found himself breathing more deeply. "Healing often feels ridiculous at first," Dr. Soman replied with a knowing smile, "but that doesn't make it less real." As the day wore on, something extraordinary happened. Crew members who had spent their entire lives preparing for war were learning to play human games, sharing meals with Earth families, and discovering that they actually enjoyed activities that had nothing to do with conquest or domination. By evening, when the official ceremony concluded with both species representatives signing a friendship charter, Vextel realized that his mighty Dominion war machine had been completely and utterly defeated. Not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by something far more powerful and terrifying than any weapon he had ever encountered. The humans had weaponized kindness itself, and they had used it to turn his entire invasion force into. Friends, as he reluctantly admitted to Dr. Soman that the breathing exercises really did help with his anxiety, Vexel couldn't help but wonder if perhaps humans were the most dangerous species in the universe after all. It's just not in the way anyone had expected.